I'm looking out my window and there's about 6 inches of snow out there, so I hope everybody's safe and warm. I'm going to talk about sales and lease contracts at a glance today. We have 2 chapters to cover this week, so this is the first of 2 lectures. Let's get right to it. This takes us away from contract law and into sales law, sales and lease contracts, which is statute law. It follows under the Uniform Commercial Code, UCC, and it is just for goods. There are, oh my goodness, 9 articles, which I'll show you here in a minute. And the 2 articles we're looking at closely today are Article 2 for sales contracts and Article 2A for lease contracts. And that deals with commercial or consumer leases in particular. There are 3 elements to consider when you're looking at a consumer lease. That's the leaseor, the leasee, and the lease payment. So those 3 things have to exist before you can have a consumer lease. Let's look at the UCC 9 articles. Let me see if we can pull this off. There you go. This is from a website called laws.com, and it was an easy guide to UCC articles, which I thought was really handy. There are 9 articles. The first one are the general provisions. Then you'll see the sales, you'll see the leases, negotiable instruments. They're talking about cashier's checks and how payment is received. Article 4 talks about bank deposits, and Article 4A talks about fund transfers. There's letters of credit taken into consideration, and bulk transfers and bulk sales are looked at in Article 6. Article 7 talks about warehouse receipts, bills of ladings, and other articles of titles, documents of title. There's Article 8 that looks at investment securities, and finally secured transactions. We're not going to look at all of these today. Basically, we're going to view a little bit about the bills of lading and documents of title. We are going to look at, in particular, Article 2 and 2A. You can find this website on the Blackboard site in session 7. So let's get back to here. Goods that are more than $500 and leases over $1,000 are covered under the UCC. And these 2 restrictions or limitations or requirements, however you want to look at it, require writing, the lease to be, or the documents to be in writing. So we have new terminology, and I think I'll just go over that real quickly so that you can get a good grasp of moving from one area to the next. UCC mainly looks at merchant to merchant, although it does do merchant to unmerchant, non-merchant. And a merchant is somebody who deals in the goods or is an expert in the area. Goods are defined as tangible, which means they're physical. The offer is a little bit different. Once the offer is definite, be it verbal or in writing, at that moment it becomes evident and it's an offer. Offers can have open terms as compared to some of the things that we've seen in contract law. The terms are more open in the UCC version. There are 2 kinds of new contracts put out for you. One is called the requirement contract, which means that the buyer will, or the seller will meet the requirements of the buyer and continue just to produce until those requirements are met. The other one is called the output contract, which means the buyer will buy all that the seller can put out or can produce at the time. There couple of this whole row here is new terms. There's parole evidence, which is, and that's called the parole evidence rule, which says that you cannot introduce prior or previous information that's not contained in the contract in a dispute. We'll look at course of dealing, usage of trade, course of performance, and these are all three of these right here fall under trying to decide when a contract has been established, and UCC looks at it a little bit differently than what the contract law does. And then after all is said and done, if there's some type of discrepancy, there is an interpretation or rules of order, so to speak, of which one of these are top priority. We will also look at, this is something we didn't really look at that closely in contract law, was risk of loss, when the title truly passes hands, and we'll look at shipment and destination contracts, and finally a new concept, which is the bailee, which is somebody who is in charge of a warehouse where your goods may be being stored. So they're a third party possession in there, so to speak. Now we want to look at, here's the difference of control. General contract law was for non-sales contracts, contracts outside of the UCC, and these were contracts for services and for real estate. When you get down to the UCC, or statutory law, which is what it's called, it is contracts for sale and lease of goods. These are services and real estate. These are goods. Now, there's laws that cover many things under the sale and lease of goods. There are some elements not covered, and the elements not covered in the statutory law that can be found in relevant common law will also apply to the sale and lease of goods. So common law or general contract law still prevails some in this UCC. Major differences, those are defined here in this table. Just a very quick overview. You have contract terms. In contract law, it must contain all the material terms. Okay, and this is where I talked about the open terms are acceptable. If the parties intend to form a contract, but the contract is not enforceable, it's not written up, all that really has to be shown is the quantity. And the UCC will fill in the details around that. So that's what we're talking about with open terms. In the acceptance area, it was the mirror image rule applies. If additional terms were added in an acceptance, a counteroffer, whatever, those mirror into the contract. When you get to sales law, you can't add those in unless the acceptance is made expressly. Okay, it's part of, it's written and it's assented and it's an additional item. It's recognized. Very, very seldom will you add something to a UCC unless both parties absolutely agree on it. When we modified in contract law, we had to have consideration. When you modify in sales law, it doesn't require consideration. It just says we're going to modify. Irrevocable offers, it's usually an option contract with consideration. Here, irrevocable offers is when the merchant makes a firm offer, and that can be without consideration. But when an offer is absolutely firm, made by the merchant, then you can't revoke that. And finally, under the statute of frauds, which is talking about what must be in writing. Material terms must be in writing. When you get to the statute of, or get to the sales law, it's a little bit different. It's only required for sales of goods over $500 and a lease over $1,000. It's not enforceable beyond the quantity specified. Merchants can satisfy the requirement by a memorandum or evidence of their agreement. And if there's gaps in it, then the UCC or the courts fill in the gaps and try to determine what was intended. There are exceptions to this, and this is specially manufactured goods, okay? Admissions by the party against whom the enforcement is sought. That's saying that the other party says, oh yeah, we did do that, I forgot, or whatever. And partial performance. So those are some exceptions to it, and as you know, there's always exceptions too. Here's the specially manufactured goods. You can use an oral contract, and that's enforceable for these three reasons: specially manufactured and obtained for a particular leasee. The goods are not suitable for resale or lease to others. The seller has substantially started to manufacture the goods. All of those cases, you can have an oral contract for that. I.e., let's say I got pins and had just my name put on it. And an oral contract would be good enough for that. And especially if they already started to manufacture them, that could be able to take that to court and they could enforce it. And I think we'll stop right there and come back to the last four things we're going to look at, because we're right at 12 minutes. So that will be part 1 of chapter 10, and we will take up with parole evidence and title and risk of loss.